Hi, it's Goldberg here. Welcome back to our channel. Today I wanted to briefly discuss something which I have called the double victim trap relationship. So what this is basically a relationship where one person is a victim of some form of past trauma and the other person that is in a relationship with the traumatized person ends up becoming a victim of the traumatized person's behavior. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is because most of our clients turn up in this condition, and it is a very sad state of affairs because for a relationship to be able to move forward in any way of healing or progression, at least one person in the relationship has to have boundaries and has to be, sovereign, meaning that they're not reacting and they're not a victim of the other person's behaviors, okay? So, as I said, it's very common for people that are dealing with spouses with unresolved trauma to react negatively and to take their behaviors and their trauma view on things personally. And this is certainly understandable. I wanted to mention just a few reasons why spouses take it personally. And the first reason that I've discovered is psychoeducation. Okay, if a spouse of someone that has unresolved trauma, if they understand how trauma works, how the unconscious mind works, how emotional triggers and emotional flashbacks work, they will tend to be less jumpy and less defensive and take the trauma behaviors less seriously and take them less personally, which means they're going to be hurt less and they're going to be able to deal with them in a more productive way, okay? So that's the first thing, is learning about trauma behaviors, what emotional flashbacks are, how trauma comes out in different behaviors, why the person is acting this way. If the person is able to understand this, it's easier to not take it personally and to act in a more effective way rather than just reacting and becoming upset, okay? Because if someone is reacting to trauma behaviors, all that's happening is that the traumatized person is getting a reaction from the other person, and they're basically just playing tennis with each other, and the relationship's not going anywhere. It's totally dysfunctional. The relationship's not going to heal. So educating yourself on trauma behaviors and understanding that is going to help you to not take these trauma behaviors that are very confusing, and sometimes they're very hurtful, okay? Especially if someone is projecting shame or guilt or other toxic negative emotions, okay? It's going to make you feel these emotions, which is very unpleasant. So if you know about it, you're going to take it less personally. So learn about these trauma behaviors and how all this works is going to help you a lot. The second thing that causes spouses to become a victim of a traumatized person's behaviors is that they may have unresolved emotional traumas or issues themselves, okay? They may have a past relationship that was in some way abusive, or they might have childhood issues that they haven't healed and resolved yet. All these types of unresolved emotional issues inside of us tend to come out in reactive ways and behaviors that we're not necessarily happy with when we're dealing with spouses that do have unresolved trauma and they are acting on it. It tends to bring out our trauma as well. So healing yourself and doing a lot of introspection and self-discovery and healing any past emotional wounds is going to help you a lot to not become a victim of your spouse's trauma behaviors. Okay, so this is number 2. The third thing that one can do to not become a victim of their spouse's trauma behaviors is to learn the effective skills and the effective way to deal with trauma behaviors. Okay, because dealing with trauma behaviors is not necessarily the textbook way of doing things. In fact, often the right thing to do in a healthy relationship is detrimental in a situation where someone is having an emotional flashback. They are acting through trauma emotions that are unresolved. So learning the skills of what to do when dealing with a spouse that is acting through trauma emotions is imperative to surviving and lasting in a relationship with a spouse that does have unresolved trauma. If you don't have the right skills and you're not sure how to handle it, you're pretty bound to react in a way that you're going to regret, and it's not going to be productive and helpful for yourself or for your spouse. Okay, so it's not your job to heal or to fix your traumatized spouse, but there are skills and there are ways to deal with trauma behaviors effectively, and it can certainly help you to not react negatively and to get hurt by these trauma behaviors. And it can even help your spouse to, sort themselves out and to aid the process of their healing, okay, if they are on the path of healing, okay? And the goal is, in any relationship that has a person in the relationship that has unresolved trauma, is to make the relationship a place that is encouraging healing and encouraging growth and self-discovery, rather than just reacting to each other's behaviors and there being two victims in a relationship instead of just one, okay? Because someone that does have unresolved trauma, they themselves are a victim of some form of past stress or past abuse, and it just doesn't make sense for the other person in a relationship to also become a victim of this person's behaviors now, okay? So two things that a person can do right out of the gate that they can use in a relationship with someone that is dealing with unresolved trauma emotions. Okay, the first one is gray rock. Okay, gray rock is exactly as it sounds, and that is to not react at all, okay? Just to be totally still and non-responsive, non-reactive. I don't really like this skill too much because it's very unrealistic for someone that is in an intimate relationship with someone that does have unresolved trauma to consistently be a gray rock and not react to their spouse, especially considering there is emotional vulnerability in the relationship. So gray rock, I don't really recommend using that as like a staple thing to do, but it can be helpful in situations where you want to react to a person's trauma behaviors that is very provoking or hurtful. It can be helpful sometimes to just be a gray rock and to not react and to just be totally still and don't do anything, okay? But as I said, it's not really realistic to do this on an ongoing basis. The other thing that I could advise right from the start that is super helpful, and this is the observe, not absorb technique. And basically it goes something like this, okay? So instead of reacting negatively to a person's accusations or blame or trauma behaviors, observing means that instead of taking it personally and reacting, you're watching and hearing what the person is doing. You're not absorbing it, and then you're simply reporting it back to the person, okay? So you're saying something like, I'm noticing that you're raising your voice right now. Okay, that's all you're doing, is just observing and reporting it back to the person. I'm noticing that you're raising your voice right now. What are you feeling? Okay, so that is something to do that's effective rather than raising your voice and trying to shout even louder than they're shouting. So this observe, not absorb technique is reporting to the person what they're doing, because someone that is having trauma responses, they often don't know what they're doing. They're not aware of how out of the box their behavior is. And if you can report that to them after observing it, it can help them to realize that, wow, yeah, I really don't need to be shouting right now, or wow, yeah, maybe I don't need to be blaming right now. Whereas if you're just reacting negatively and responding with a unpleasant behavior yourself, the traumatized person is not learning anything new about themselves or their behavior. the situation is not becoming more connected and more healthy. It's just going down and down further. So observing, not absorbing, and reporting to the person what they're doing is a super helpful behavior to someone that is acting through unresolved trauma. I highly recommend you try it. But of course, the best thing to do is to work with someone that understands trauma behaviors, and that can help you attain the right skills, and to also help if you need to do any healing to be able to facilitate a healthy environment for your traumatized spouse to find their own healing, okay? So someone that does have unresolved trauma, they do need to take on a healing path for themselves, and the spouse's job is to make themselves a stable and healthy support for them. So if you have any questions on this situation of a double victim trap, if you yourself feel like that you've become a victim of your spouse's trauma behaviors and you would like to do some self-healing or maybe gain the skills to be able to deal with these confusing and frustrating and hurtful behaviors, then please feel free to reach out to us. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we look forward to seeing you in future videos.